Welcome back to Feeling Seen, the podcast about the movies that make us feel seen. I got to know writer-comedian Moshe Kasher in a way that might be familiar to you. I listened to his podcast, The Endless Honeymoon, which he does with his wife, Natasha Leggero. Moshe has had a long career in comedy at this point, but he's spent his life trying on all sorts of new communities and identities, a journey he explores in depth in his brand new book, SUBCULTURE VULTURE, a memoir in 6 scenes. It's a journey worthy of the heroes he's brought to discuss today: Luke Skywalker, Harry Potter, and Edmund from the Chronicles of Narnia. I had the most fun talking with Moshe about his life and that deep impulse to open a door to a magical new world. Like all great stories, our conversation starts simply enough, with the two of us noticing that we're wearing the same brand of headphones.
Okay, let's fucking go.
I do believe we have the same little headphone situation on.
Yeah, but you don't have them for the same reason I do.
Oh, because you are a DJ.
Because I'm cool. Yeah, because I'm super cool.
Yeah, because I'm really cool.
Because I'm having a midlife crisis, yeah.
But you've always done this, right?
No.
You've long been in the music mixing arts?
That's exactly incorrect, and it is a part of the saga of this book. When I was a teenager, starting at about 16, I started mixing records. And these are in the vinyl days, in the early rave scene days. Mm-hmm. And I was at a great advantage as a fledgling DJ because I had a deaf mother who could not hear the nightclub that I had turned my bedroom into. So this was good.
Right, yes.
But in this book, I go through a thing that I find myself going through again and again with these different subcultures that I lived in, which is finding this like insane kind of magic fairy dust that changes my life, and then eventually becoming like, do I belong in this fairy kingdom anymore? So I left. I left the rave scene behind when I was about, I don't know, 21, maybe 22. Mm-hmm. I kept dancing, going out dancing for a few years after that, but DJing through a long kind of ego struggle saga fell out of my life. And then, fast forward, I don't know, 15 years, I started writing this book, and the first segment of the book I wrote was the one about the rave scene. And while I was writing that book, I was listening to old 90s mixtapes and DJs that I used to love dancing to. And at the end of it, I thought, I think I want to try this again. So, and I thought, what better midlife crisis than picking up a nice little musical hobby? It's not a Corvette. I'm not cheating on my wife. I'm not doing...
it's not an expense you have to clear.
That's right. I'm not doing like an insane orthorexia of CrossFit 9 days a week, Mm-hmm. It's just nice. Although my wife is not thrilled. She's not deaf, to my great chagrin.
Yeah.
And hers too. And she once asked me, are you DJing at me? Which is not what I'm doing.
What an aggressive, are you teaching? Do we need to talk? Is this you making the opening salvo for a conversation we must have?
I think she thought she would go into a meeting and I would be like, great, she's on a Zoom. It's time for me to start pumping out techno beats. Again, this is a big part of the book is like, and I didn't realize this when I started writing it, is that it only towards the end of the book that I realized that in some ways the book was like a time capsule for my kid to show her what the accidental life was like before the internet brought all of the choices that you'll make directly to you. Our life was this, I describe it as like a pinball game. It was, and mine more than most, but everybody's life was a little bit of a pinball game. If you happen to, befriend a skater, then you were writing graffiti and, smoking a blunt under an overpass. And if you happen to befriend a goth kid, then you were, doing a bloodletting ceremony in a field somewhere. Like it was just this sort of accident of thing, because there was no access to information. You would kind of have to go on a quest, which does lead us to this episode. You had to have to go on a quest to find your people. And that is what my book is about.
Well, and that's going to work as a great bridge, I think, to the characters that you presented for our conversation today, because you picked a trio of characters, which I think is very appropriate for somebody who has lived as many lives as yourself. And you picked a real big three: Harry Potter, Luke Skywalker, and Edmund from, like, the Narnia books, the Chronicles of Narnia.
let me take you through my process. I felt deeply self-conscious about picking either Harry Potter or Luke Skywalker because they're so obvious. They're such I want it, what do I want to pick? I want to pick like the kid from City of God or like a samurai from a Kurosawa film. Now that's where I felt seen. But in reality, the three of them, I picked them all because they're all kind of the same. They all have this very particular trait in common, which I find, especially at the end of this book, I found like that was the experience that I had as a young person, is the experience of those three. And also with Harry Potter, I really I'm deeply transphobic. And so that really helps, like anti-trans stuff.
I'm so glad you could find your people in Joanne.
Well, that was the other reason I felt a little self-conscious about Harry Potter, is he's not as innocent of a wizard these days, is he?
Like you said, there is no innocence anymore. We've even been robbed of that. Right.
Oh, by the way, that's actually totally true. It's like even these characters that were like these classic figures from youth, everything is so political now. You're even like, wait, even listen, I was a Roald Dahl reader as a young man. I mean, I love Roald Dahl more than anything.
Yeah, Roald Dahl was very big for me.
He's got some issues in his past as well with my particular tribe of people. But so it's not new, I guess, that people that you love say things that are funky about the character. And you can still, I guess, find a way to love those characters.
Before you got to the end of your book and coalescing what you were talking about with like sort of synthesizing your life, this time capsule, perhaps for your child, was it before then that you had realized that you aligned with these characters in such the way that you did with this common trait? Or was that a realization that came as you put this all in one package?
Listen, I knew growing up that the kinds of books that I liked, I always knew are these like, it's like a classic, I mean, I guess Alice in Wonderland was kind of the first, right? It's this kind of classic trope of weak sort of, Alice wasn't as I think abused as Luke and Edmund and particularly Harry Potter, but this kind of like weak person, this weak child that thinks they have no power, that thinks that they are alone in the universe, and then all of a sudden this wild inciting incident occurs where someone comes to them and says, if you follow me this way, you will find that not only is there another world than the banal one you've been living in, but you're actually incredibly mighty in that world. You have superpowers that you didn't know about. That to me, when I started writing the book, I thought I was just writing about these 6 different universes that I lived in. And I was wondering as I was writing it, like, what is the thesis here? What's the through line? And it's obvious now, and it doesn't seem like a profound realization, that the through line is me, right? I'm the connective tissue, but also this story of over and over again finding, like, I found a secret, and I found a secret universe, and I found my secret people and a secret tribe, and I found these secret superpowers. That's why I relate to those 3 so much.
You're a wizard, Harry.
I'm a what?
A wizard. And a thumping good one, I'd wager, once you trade up a little.
No, you've made a mistake. I mean, I can't be a wizard. I mean, I'm just Harry. Just Harry.
Well, just Harry. Did you ever make anything happen? Anything you couldn't explain when you were angry or scared?
And the book, by the way, is called Subculture Vulture, is a memoir in 6 scenes. I believe that's the correct subtitle.
Yep, that's it.
So, in your questing, were you consciously looking for, did you feel like that kind of, that, slighted weak child in the process of your questing? Or did that align with you when you were young and you were trying to find something greater, something more, something truer? Or was it more happenstance as you were doing it, but with the gift of hindsight, you can put these things together?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And I think I wish that I had been a more proactive seeker. I was definitely an active seeker, but I don't know if I knew why I was looking. I knew that I was unsatisfied. But did I go into my first rave at age 16 in 1995 going, I'm going to go find my people? Sort of, in a weird way.
Something pulled you there.
Well, something pulled me there. And I know what it was that pulled me, which is that The first scene is Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got sober when I was 15 years old. I got out of rehab for the last time at 15. I'd already been in and out of rehab since I was about 13. So it was a
I know it's been a long
time.
time since then, but I hope you still feel very proud of yourself for that, because it's not easy at any age or any time. So,
well, it's actually funny you say that, because for many years I was very proud of how young I was and how long I'd been sober. And then there was a weird shift. I don't remember exactly when it happened, where I started to become embarrassed about it. It started to raise more questions than it answered, you know? When I got to about 30, and it was like, I'd been sober 15 years, all of a sudden people would go like, what? Like the math ain't mathin' exactly as people. And so then there would be these like bevy of questions like, what were you doing? And I know what they want me to answer is heroin. But unfortunately, I don't have that answer, you know?
Well, I'm thrilled you don't.
No, me too. But when there's somebody asking, when somebody said, well, what were you doing back then that you needed to go to rehab? They want me to say, I was a hobo on the train system, shooting dope and eating boots. But unfortunately...
Yeah, like a needle sticking out between my toes and I was passed out, like that kind of,
but
like,
with a Lego set in the other hand, you know?
Yeah, because you're a child.
But unfortunately, it was just more classic juvenile delinquency. Yes, there was a lot of drugs and there was a lot of violence and weirdness and awful stuff, but it wasn't as hardcore as well, I don't know. It's hard to even say. It does feel like sometimes I'm describing a different human being. I'm a lot older, but I'm also very different. And when I got sober, you know, I came to peace, even as a really young person at 15, I came to peace with the fact that I was sacrificing everything cool in life. Like I was ready I wanted to like survive, and I wanted to grow up and not go to prison. But I was also like, that means I'm going to be a loser. That is just the way that this is, because I only had one frame of reference for cool.
You're going to be a square?
I'm going to be a square. That's it. I'm going to, you know, because everybody I'm hanging out with, you know, I would go to young people's meetings. That was what they were called, young people's AA meetings. And I would be the youngest person by a decade. You know, these people were old people. They were 25, 26 years old. I mean, they were disgusting, right? So decrepit
people.
So I had to like come to terms with the fact that I was ready to like close the door on cool. And even though if I had a little bit of wisdom, I would realize that the kind of mind that manifests such a thought is deeply broken, right? If you think if I stop drinking and getting high, that's it. There's nothing else. That means that all I've ever done is drink and get high. And so I got into AA, and I decided to close the door. And then at about, you know, almost a year sober, I decided, no, I'm going to go on this quest to find like a young person's identity that will give me a social life, but in a different way. And that's when I went to my first rave. And when I walked in there, I was a lot like Edmund walking through the wardrobe in Narnia.
Oh my God, yeah.
Because I walked in and I was molecularly reconfigured in that first party. I was a shifted human being, and it pinged my reality into a new path.
What is your name, son of Adam?
Edmund.
And how, Edmund, did you come to enter my dominion?
I'm not sure. I was just following my sister.
Your sister? How many are you?
4. Lucy's the only one that's been here before. She said she met some faun called Tumnus. Peter and Susan didn't believe her. I didn't either.
Edmund, you look so cold. Come and sit with me.
Did you find any like sober or straight edge people when you were there who were just like blissing out on the experience?
Very few, and when we found each other, we liked each other. I got older, as I got a little older and further into the rave thing, there did start to be people that I would know from recovery that would come to raves on the weekends, and that was awkward because by that time I had begun selling ecstasy for a living, which was clean and sober, selling ecstasy. But the thing about ecstasy sales is that it's a very unique kind of drug dealing. which is that it all happens at once in one area. It's not like you're on a corner and then interested parties come up and they buy it. It's like you're in. It's a lot more like a open air market in Marrakesh. It's like you walk into the market. That's the opening, the hallway of the rave. There's a
so people can get started.
Yeah, there's like a Lieutenant Worf type, manhood ritual. Remember the pain sticks with the, those are all ecstasy dealers, and everybody's saying E, and then you walk through the line, and then you buy your ecstasy, and then the job is done. But the awkward part for me was I was one of those guys, one of the barkers, and I would see a guy coming from the meeting, so I would be like, Egads, good to see you, recovery brother, from the Wednesday night meeting.
My bad. Hey, it's not me. It's not me. It's
I'm just standing
else.
here. These guys, look at all these drug dealers around us. So that was weird.
I'm the sober drug chaperone, which honestly has been me in many parts of my life. I'm the sober chaperone of
me too,
of the drug experience. So okay,
I had I don't know how, but I had a sort of metaphysical attraction to people that were having bad trips or overdosing. I don't know how it would happen, but I always thought like it was sort of mystical. Like the sober guy somehow would stumble onto the person having a hard time who was capable of like getting that person to help or talking that person down because I wasn't freaking out on my own drugs. So that's lucky, I guess.
Yeah. Now, did you, like, with that, like, that's a tough thing for a kid to do, to be able to, because, like, there is a sense of, like, cool and experimentation and adventure and boldness and danger about being somebody who engages in that kind of stuff recreationally, and you making this decision to decommit from it and being like, I'm leaving a life of cool kind of thing. Were you somebody who liked, when you were growing up watching movies, did you like Luke Skywalker? Because, like, I feel like he could be, like, maybe kind of corny to somebody whose life is, like, a little bit more intense. Or did you actually like these, these kind of straighten up and fly right characters like a Harry Potter when you were younger and watching stuff?
Well, it's funny is, first of all, I didn't grow up with Harry Potter. I experienced Harry Potter late because... and I remember how I experienced Harry Potter. It actually brings us to our another scene, which is the deafness in American Sign Language. All my family is deaf. My mother, my father, my half-sister, my half-brother, my cousins, they're all deaf. And I was a sign language interpreter for 15 years. And the bane of my existence was when I would get a job at an elementary school. They would do story time, and this was at the height of Harry Potter. And I would be tasked to interpret Harry Potter, which is horrifying. Wow. Because every name is like Professor Stufflestuff, and you're like, I mean, with the quixotic mushroom balonic potion, and you're like, I don't know any of these words, so you're just like finger spelling these horrifying names.
Wow.
Welcome to Hogwarts. Now, in a few moments, you will pass through these doors and join your classmates. But before you can take your seats, you must be sorted into your houses. They are Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin.
So I resisted Harry Potter for a long time. But then a little later I read it, and it was a great series. But I always, with Luke Skywalker, with the Narnia kids, I always had this fantasy, and I think this is why those books work so well, is that I had this fantasy of being pulled out of an unacceptable reality and discovering that like I said, not only is there a beautiful world out there that's bigger than I imagined, but also I'm big in it. I'm a master in it. I'm a king. I'm a knight. I'm the most powerful person because my whole childhood was filled with this feeling of being weak, being less than, having no power, and living in an ugly reality. And once when I would read those books obsessively and watch Star Wars, I watched Star Wars obsessively because it felt like if I could just have an Obi-Wan come to me. Listen, I don't want my aunts and uncles to be destroyed and killed in order to find it, but I want my path. I want to find my path out of here, and I want it to be an exciting one.
I have something here for you. Your father wanted you to have this when you were old enough, but your uncle wouldn't allow it. He feared you might follow old Obi-Wan on some damn fool idealistic crusade like your father did.
What is it?
Your father's lightsaber.
did you feel when you were within these subcultures, and Burning Man is a part of one of those cultures, I believe, as well, did you find when you were in them, were you satiated within them, or did you still feel something that you were trying to fill within each one, or did each one work for you as you were in it?
There's like these different categories, right? The comedy and Burning Man and Rave category, and AA to some degree, but it's more of a slow burn. Rave is like
Sure.
AA is like a medicine that you take slowly over time, and you start to real. That one's cool because it's like it's almost like you take a daily vitamin, and then a year later you're like, I have superpowers. The truth is, it was a more holistic and probably a more honest version of becoming mighty, is the things that I found in AA. But Burning Man and Raves, and stand-up to some degree, but Burning Man and Raves in particular, was a hard stop through the looking glass, through the wardrobe. Yeah. I'm off. Well, I was going to say I'm off Dantooine, but I guess that's not true because Burning Man looks so much like Dantooine. But it was...
He did, in fact, live in Black Rock City.
That's right. They both had this feeling of like, I have walked through a portal and I am now different. I am a different person, and I am, and this is a part of me permanently, but it is sudden and it is dramatic, and I am this guy now.
I've come back to complete the training.
No more training do you require. Already know you that which you need.
Then I am a Jedi.
Not yet. One thing remains. Vader. You must confront Vader. Then, only then, a Jedi will you be. And confront him you will.
Well, that does feel like those heroes' journeys that we're touching on with this, where suddenly, like, Luke, Harry, like, going through the wardrobe, Edmund, you're handed something that, like, even if you've always been, like, aspiring toward what it can give you, suddenly you're handed the responsibility of it too. And it's like, shit, it's all here at once. It's all happening. Like, that does feel like that drastic, like, he gets picked up by Obi-Wan and everything's different. He goes through, like, platform 9 3/4 and everything's different. Like, that does feel like actually a pretty kind of one-to-one in terms of the experience. Like, fuck, there was before and now there's after.
That's exactly right. There's before and now there's after. And, the unfortunate part, not unfortunate, but just like the reality is, like, unlike the hero's journey of Harry Potter and Luke Skywalker, like, my destiny wasn't actually contained in as an end game in these new universes. My destiny was to wander through them, and like, and destiny. I'm not really an actual believer in destiny in anything other than like a kind of beautiful metaphor, I guess. But like, I realize now, like, what destiny is just when you get somewhere and then you look back and you go, whoa, this is where I was headed, right? So each of these things, each of these worlds, to some degree, like, the magic started to wear off. I haven't been to a rave in 15, 20 years, and I do still go to Burning Man, and this last year was my 24th time attending, and I worked there for many years. I would say I'm officially old school there, but it's not as magical as it used to be for me, and that's a weird thing, because you should never see a naked fire spinner falling from a 40-foot silk and then catching herself right before she hits the ground and then, like, blow a plume of fire out of her mouth and go, ugh, this again? But
not that. Don't they have any new tricks?
But there is this feeling of like of things change. Magic doesn't feel magical, and what is it that I'm taking with me that I've packed into my sort of selfness that I can bring for the next step on my journey. My life is a lot more mellow now. Obviously, I'm a dad. Things are chill now. But I still have all of those elements, those It's kind of like when the Narnia kids went back to the real world and they couldn't come to Narnia anymore. They weren't kings and queens back in England, but they were forever forever changed as a result of their experiences, and they could bring that sort of that feeling of royalty back into the real world.
The coats.
Please, they're on my foot.
He's having a God! Stop shoving! On your coat!
Oh, there you are. What are you all doing in the wardrobe?
You wouldn't believe us if we told you, sir.
Try me.
I think that touches on like just the seemingly like totally unrelated start of this conversation where we're talking about sort of like the loss, the diminishing of innocence in like the grace period that you get for it. I think that sort of coincides with the sort of diminishing of magic. And I think too that like talking about like film generally, like I remember like a pivot point that I had when I went and saw the movie Oblivion, which is honestly to me one of the best looking like movies with visual effects like I've ever seen. Like anytime you get like a big structure that's far away to make it look really real, like when you're in like Force Awakens and you see like or Last Jedi when you see like an Imperial cruiser down on Jakku, you're like, that's a fucking real Imperial cruiser crashed down in the desert. Like just such that the digital effects look absolutely peak. I remember watching Oblivion and the movie's just like okay, and it got just like tepid reviews. And I remember thinking like, wow, we finally crossed the threshold where looking so marvelous doesn't really count anymore. It feels like magic is harder to conjure because we are in many ways, like there's so much the luxury around us of being able to consume extravagance in media all of the time that it does have the effect of like, yes, like Marvel has kind of diluted its brand by putting out too many movies, but at the same time, like the fact that something like a Aquaman 2 or Guardians 3 can look pedestrian is like, I find that to be a sad thing to cope with.
That's
like,
so interesting.
You know, when matte painting used to suffice, like watching the movie fucking Krull, and I was just wonderstruck as a child. And now it's kind of like, damn, what do you gotta do? You have to fall from 40 feet on a silk strap and breathe fire out of your mouth, and it's still not enough for people? Like, it's a weird time.
That's really interesting. What you're saying is like, so it's like a cousin of what I'm talking about in the book, but it's a completely different angle. Because I'm talking about this loss of innocence on an emotional level, and you're describing a loss of innocence on an aesthetic level, on a visual level. And I think that both things are true, and they're both due to the same thing, which is this sort of gavage, this tidal wave of digital information and savvy. Like everything has become, we are too informed on every single level, visually, emotionally, politically. Like we are savvier than ever, and we are sadder than ever. It didn't help.
Yeah.
There's something tragic. There's something tragic and sort of beautiful in a weird way about that. Cause like it's interesting that you can't, like I watched The Stand, the new Stand miniseries.
Like
Did
that
you see
series.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw a couple episodes of it.
Listen, it ain't great. But
no, it's not.
I went back and then I was watching the miniseries from the early 90s or maybe the late 80s. And I was like, now this is what I like. I like this style of acting. And the acting back then was so much like folksier in this weird way.
Yeah, it was folksier.
And it's better. It is better. And I was like, why can't we have this anymore? And I realized like our eyes and our minds couldn't accept that level of sincerity in acting Like, acting now must be shinier and a little bit more tongue-in-cheek.
And there's got a little irony. Gotta have a little bit of, I threw up it, like, the length to which the phrase, I threw up in my mouth, has stuck around. Like, I think I even just saw it in the new Mean Girls musical. And, like, the acknowledgement of, like, the I did a thing within that joke to me encapsulates, like, where we cannot come back from.
That's exactly right. Like, you can't go backwards, and everything has to be... That's why we liked RRR so much, you know? Right? Because all of a sudden it was this hyper sincere no tongue in any cheek, like a piece of media from another universe almost. And we go, it's like, it was weird because it was hyper modern, but it was also nostalgic. Like, oh wow, a movie that is taking these swings that are so insane, and we are not, it is not self-aware. I mean, I'm sure that the filmmaker is self-aware, but he's not presenting it in a way that's like a self-aware, like, that's Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Galaxy is always winking at you a little bit. And there was no wink in RRR. And there was certainly no wink in Star Wars. Star Wars was, it's a space opera. It's a fucking opera.
Yeah. It's time for a quick break, but I'll be back shortly with more from Moshe Kasher. Then I'll have one quick thing about the directorial debut coming up from Dev Patel called Monkey Man. It looks to be an exciting action thrill ride for us all.
The Eurovision Song Contest. Hundreds of millions of people watch it every year.
It played a part in a democratic revolution in Portugal, it introduced the world to river dance, and it launched Celine Dion's career.
But you might have never watched it.
It's got so much history and so many storylines that it can feel overwhelming to get into.
It's like a Real Housewives season, but everyone's a better singer.
Well, sometimes. But that's where we come in. I'm Dimitri Pompey.
I'm Oscar Montoya.
And I'm Jeremy Bent, and we're the hosts of Eurovangelists.
If you're new to Eurovision, we'll tell you everything you need to know to start enjoying the world's most important song competition.
And if you're already a fan, we'll dive deep on its wildest moments, like when Ireland sent a turkey puppet to sing for them.
Eurovangelists.
New episodes every Thursday.
On MaximumFun.org or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. I'm talking with comedian and writer Moshe Kasher, whose new book is called Subculture Vulture, a memoir in 6 scenes. Let's get right back into it.
I remember I saw some movie, I don't even remember what it was, but there was some kid, there was a kid in it and an adult in it. And I kept waiting for the horrible thing to happen to this child. Like it never happened. And I was like, oh my God, something has happened to the way that I view media, that it's so sinister and dark that I can't see this relationship on film without thinking something horrifying is about to happen. So there's that lack of innocence is, it's not like I went into it with that. It's like, it's been ingrained in us to see this sort of shadow on the edge of our media. That's what's so interesting to me about my years in the rave world. And even Burning Man to some degree. Burning Man's a little bit more directly debaucherous, but the rave thing for me was so interesting because where I was developmentally, it was simultaneously a drug-fueled sex. Everybody was fucking everybody. Everybody's on drugs. But at the same time, it was this unbelievably innocent experience, this incredibly sincere experience. Like Burning Man definitely has more of a tongue in its cheek. It's a lot more comedy driven and a lot more like fuck society driven.
Okay, interesting, yeah.
But raves, while they are fuck society, it's more of a like fuck society, not because it sucks, but because we want to go into this warehouse and love on each other. And like that was so what I needed. And, you know, that like Harry Potter and Luke Skywalker have this similar thing, which is that they find their mighty powers and then they go into the world where they're powerful and they start to discover, and this is sort of what happened to me. They start to discover that actually there's darkness there, that even the world that was promised, even the hero's journey is filled with peril and is filled with, and you don't come out the other end the same shimmering creature that you went into it. That the path itself.
You could be tempted at becoming a Sith. That temptation will sit there.
Exactly, and then you have to realize that the Sith was. You're gonna like this. The Sith was in you the whole time.
Luke, you do not yet realize your importance. You have only begun to discover your power. Join me, and I will complete your training. With our combined strength, we can end this destructive conflict and bring order to the galaxy.
I'll never join you!
If you only knew the power of the dark side. Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father.
He told me enough. He told me you killed him.
No. I am your father.
But it's true. Like the seed of Sith was inside of Luke the whole time because his father was ultimate Sith, right? It's like, and so as opposed to Edmund, who I think in some ways Edmund is the for my Rave thing anyway, is the biggest corollary for me, because Edmund was rotten when he walked through the wardrobe. And what he found inside the wardrobe and inside Narnia was all of this pure light. And he came back to the world, even when his journey was over, he was a changed person for the better. And that is a lot of what I found in Raves. It was this kind of, and it was naive. I mean, and by the way, the Narnia movies and books, they're naive. They're a silly kind of naive. They're not, they don't have the depth of the Star Wars journey. But they were aspirational for me. And definitely that's what I found in the Rave, was this very innocent version of finding my people.
Was there any aspect of the heroism or responsibility that drew you to these stories as well? Or is that a side piece and primarily about like the leaving the terrible life to find something is truer and greater for you? Or was it like, but I want to be the one at the center. Like, I want to be the one who was foretold.
No, 1,000%. And I didn't know it when I was walking in. All of these worlds share this thing in common, which is once I get in and I feel the molecular reconfiguration, my next step always is I want to own this. I have like main character syndrome. I want to be I want to run it and here's what's really, and this really is Harry Potter and really is Luke Skywalker. The nasty thing about becoming a professional in these worlds is the minute you cross the line into from like acolyte into professional into leader, right? It begins to degrade the magic, and that happened again and again in this book and in my life. Is like, once I started throwing raves and becoming a DJ and then eventually becoming a drug dealer, which is the darkest thing in that story. Or once I started to work at Burning Man and become, getting to see how the psychedelic sausage was stuffed, the magic starts to fade away because it looks like more and more like the real world, like the kind of greed and evil. Evil isn't probably the right word, but like the dark side.
Well, and I think that like going into comedy and going into entertainment, and you've had your own show with Problematic, your wife has had her own show with Another Period, you guys have your Netflix comedy special together, the Honeymoon Netflix special, which is a spin-off of like the Endless Honeymoon podcast that you guys do. I mean, you're in it. And
luckily there's nothing dark about Hollywood or the entertainment industry, so there's no dark side. I was lucky that I found a pure world to live in. Finally,
you found the one. Well, how have you found that? Like in a life of becoming accustomed to the cyclical nature of entering into magic and then feeling that magic fade and then reconfiguring yourself elsewhere. How have you come to process or cope with existing within sort of like the awareness of that diminishing magic, but wanting to stay with your craft and a love for it? Like, how does that look when you are in your like latest phase and something that feels like maybe like an indefinite phase? I don't know.
I think it is indefinite, and part of that is just my age. I think that I've spent 20 years in the comedy world, and it's like I ain't going nowhere because I don't really have anywhere to go. It's like it's a little late. It's a little late to discover I don't know the wonders of contact improv at this point in my life. So it's like, I think that what keeps comedy, because definitely the same thing happened. The first time I stood on stage, I had another reconfiguration and another sort of permanent railroad switch in my track. of my life. But then, you know, comedy, I mean, some people have a meteoric rise. I did not. It took me a long time to get any recognition. And I finally, I grinded and grinded. And unlike Raves, it wasn't an immediate magic. It was like a magic I had to manifest through like extreme
I don't know that
hard
anybody
work.
grinds like comics and musicians. I mean, the grind and the stick to itiveness that is required is unbelievable.
Yeah, well, I would say the monkeys with the little organ.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody grinds like them.
Nobody grinds like them, and few jobs more thankless.
Yeah, that's so true. Nobody respects them at all.
Nobody respects them.
But I think so. Yes. So then, you know, it's been 20 years that I've been in comedy, and there's definitely darkness. And forget the news cycle darkness that everybody's always talking about with comedy.
Yeah.
Leaving that aside, because, you know, I think that too much attention is paid to comedy as a cultural force. You know, it's like every world, every career, every universe has problematic people and has problematic sentiment with it, whatever. I mean, I think it's a significant story. I'm not saying leave us alone. I'm just saying it doesn't feel like it's endemic to comedy, but there's darkness not only in the community, but also just in the process that is required to try to make it is so self-driven and ego-focused and me all the time, which is not good for the human spirit. Just like, pay attention to me. I need... so yes, there's a darkness that makes me wish that I could just jump on a spaceship and like transport to another universe where I never did this. But I think what keeps me going and keeps it fresh or whatever is that in this field I am generating and I am creating and offering, and like even if it isn't accepted or isn't like a mega hit, I have a thing to continue to bring. As opposed to these, you know, the other universes like the Burning Man and the Raves, I was trying to jump into a pool and grab as much of the water as I could. Here, I'm sort of like bringing water to the table and saying, like, what do you think? Does this quench your thirst? Do you like it? And I think that process is more substantive and it's more sustainable, where, you know, I wrote this book, I wrote this script, I have a new stand-up hour, I have an offering for you, and I hope that it does something for you. So I think I'll stick around.
What do you kind of see as, like, because you have the, like, in the end of the Harry Potter series, it has, like, the flash forward, and, like, you know, you have, I think it's, like, Ginny and Harry are together, and Ron and Hermione. And then we obviously, like, there's now, the Skywalker saga is now 9 movies, and when we find Luke in the most recent trilogy, he is isolated on a stormy island with a bunch of fish nuns serving blue milk. What do you see as your postscript that you hope to be heading toward?
P.S. The idea that Luke just chilling out, meditating on a rock, drinking the blue milk. I mean, that sounds... There's something very, very tantalizing about that. That sounds great. Abdicating all responsibility for saving the world and just like sitting back on a rock and thinking about stuff. Ooh, mama, that sounds nice. What's my postscript? I feel like I mean, God, this is going to sound corny, but the truth is, like,
I love it already. I love sincerity. Give me corny.
Well, it's just like I have this kid now, and like that's, I don't think having kids is for everybody, but it was certainly for me was this feeling of like all the existential angst. Not that I'm free of it, but all this like questing is like over now because I'm like, oh, I get it. Like I'm just supposed to like pass on this information to this other person. I really am on a quest. Now I'm Obi-Wan. You know,
you're Obi-Wan. Oh my God,
she's Luke, and my job is to, like, you know, give her some of these little kernels of magic, especially because it feels like society now has become something that you have to fend off as opposed to something that you inculcate. You know, it's like I want to, and I take great joy in the fact that I'm able to give her the things that I love about the world and try to protect her from the things that I think are scary about the world. So I don't know. My postscript, comics don't really retire, but if I was Luke, I would move to an island and just surf and live on a hut with my daughter and my wife and eat fruits and stuff. But I don't see it happening. So I think I'll just be doing this.
I guess my last thing then would be, do you find the thing where the magic can still renew itself perpetually, at least to some degree?
That's a great question. Well, okay, like I said, the two of the worlds that are permanent. You know, a big part of my story in the book about AA is this, and I had a lot of self-consciousness about writing it, is that I don't do that anymore. I moved on from that world, but I'm still sober, and I still live my life in a lot of ways according to some of the principles that I gained from that universe. But it's less a part of my identity now. I mean, it just isn't really as a part of my identity. It's more a part of my past. And then there's like deafness and Judaism, which are these things that they didn't have this. They were more worlds that I was born into. They were my Dantooines or my my London or my. I don't want to say they were my cubby under the stairs because but they did have trauma to them. But they sunk into my bones in this way that's like really permanent, you know? And I just move through the world as I will always be a person. I'm not in AA anymore, but I will always be a person who is a child of deaf adults. And I will always be a Jew. Like these are, and they loom less large, but they sink more deeply, if that makes sense. Right.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if they don't feel magical per se, but their permanence is, there's something sort of magical about that. But with Burning Man, in the book, I described this process of the magic wearing off and me deciding to reconfigure myself to keep going. All these other things I like left. And Burning Man, I thought, you know, I could change the way I approach this. I could say it's not magical anymore, but I still like it and I still want to attend. Now, I'm sure I won't attend. I'm sure I'll stop someday. But I went last year and it wasn't like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening at all. But it was still like, this is a world that I lived in and I still love it and I still want to be here. I still feel magic though on stage when things are going
that's
well.
Wonderful.
It's true. I mean, I still feel like it's still a beautiful experience for me to make a crowd laugh. I still feel magic when I write. But I also, much like Luke, although he seemed a little miserable, I feel like the magic moments are quieter now. I don't need an Oppenheimer explosion anymore. You know, like I just need to my life is calmer and I don't mind it this way. And yeah, it is magical to watch my kid kind of walk on her own journey and figure out like what's going to happen for her and where she's going to land. And that to me is also very magical. But yeah, I feel like I feel there are less explosions and there's more of a eternal flame.
Well, Moshe, I listened to your episode of Endless Honeymoon with Aparna Nancherla recently, and you guys commiserated about how you recently on book tours where you were asked interminably the same questions over and over again. So I hope today was not that for you, and I greatly appreciate your time.
You had great questions. I loved it. I really like the idea of what still feels magical. I mean, listen, I want to answer that again. I realized in a lot of ways, the way I chased after these worlds was the way that a drug addict chases after a high. You know, when you get high for the first time, it's like the most incredible feeling on earth. And then you chase the dragon. I was kind of wondering
that in my head, if there was a sort of like an extension of like, you know, someone coming from an AA, someone who has gone into sobriety, like who's in recovery. Like, it's amazing. Like my dad's been in recovery now from his last bout with drugs for like going on like 15 years. But like, I still see in him so much every day the ways in which like that part of him still exists, and he exercises it in banal ways, but it's like it is like you're
chasing a luck dragon, not chasing the dragon, right? It's like you're so yes, I was going to get high off of these worlds, and the fact that my world feels calmer and less explosive, but still feels like little bits of magic. I find magic in you know in nature too. Like the fact that it's a calmer, less get me high on this feeling makes me feel like I have done the work of self-integration, which I think is like I mean, I don't think I still do things. I mean, I have a nicotine pod in my mouth right now during this podcast. But I do feel like on some level, all these pieces of me have created like a kind of healing, and that's good.
I don't know. There's nowhere to go from that, but thank you. Like, I feel like that's the perfect bow on the present. So Moshe, thank you so much for coming and talking to us. And Subculture Vulture, a memoir in 6 scenes. That is what brought you here. And I am glad that our destinies intertwined for this moment. I truly appreciate it.
This whole podcast, I can only say one thing, which is that I was feeling seen.
It's what we try to do here. It's our mandate here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Huge thank you to Moshe Kasher for joining us. His new memoir, once again, is Subculture Vulture, and that's on shelves as of yesterday. Moshe is doing a multi-city book tour as well, so find out the dates for that in the link we have in the show notes. And now, my one quick thing before we go about an exciting movie on the horizon. It is called Monkey Man, and it is the directorial debut of fantastic actor Dev Patel, who is also starring in the titular role of the Monkey Man. Let me read you a brief little summary. An anonymous young man unleashes a campaign of vengeance against the corrupt leaders who murdered his mother and continue to systematically victimize the poor and the powerless. So we have a bit of a Robin Hood story coming up. And to me, the most exciting thing about this is that it is an actor making his foray into direction in an action movie. To say we are like in a zenith of action, it's sort of unfair to action in the way that saying horror was in a renaissance on the heels of, thanks to Get Out, thanks to The Witch, thanks to The Babadook, when these are genres that have been rich with quality, have been so prolific, have huge followings who are passionate about them as practically lifestyles who will categorically watch kind of any movie that comes out in these genres because they are such fans. And there is a constant steady stream of good work. But thanks to big headlining achievements like the John Wick franchise, for example, it has allowed for an expanded imagination in the minds of perhaps non-action-centric movie fans to see examples of the form that make it feel like the artistry is heightened, make it feel like now this is something that I can get into. This is the balletic form of action that I can, elevated action, if you will. And I won't, because that's gross, because action has always been top tier. It's just whether or not you've been paying attention. In any case, we have Dev Patel taking the helm of a film, and I'm so glad to know that his passion lies in bringing more of the action arts to all of us as well. He is the director, as I've said. We should shout out, to be thorough, the fight choreographer for this film is Brahim Chab, and he has done fight coordination, assistant fight coordination, has been a stunt performer in so many titles. He has worked with stars like Scott Adkins. He's worked on films for stars like Scott Adkins, Donnie Yen, Tiger Shroff. He was a stunt performer in the movie War, which is a fantastic Indian spectacle action picture that, of course, features a crucial plot line about the intimacy between male friends and male competitors. It looks super cool. The production design looks absolutely stunning. I am so excited to sink my teeth into another underground society filled with suspicious and compelling and rich characters, as movies like Blade and, yes, the Wick franchise have taught us to really appreciate, I would say, over the past decade. Yeah, it looks super cool. I will always stan another filmmaker centering action as the art form that it has always been. And this feels like a relevant moment to put out a little footnote there. This is this little personal thing. It's not like a whole win quick thing because the movie's not out yet, but XYZ Films did recently pick up the domestic distribution to the next film in the Skylines franchise, one that I love, from writer and director Liam O'Donnell. It is called Warpath, and it stars, this is relevant because it stars the Iko Uwais, and the Uwais team is doing stunts and fight choreography for that film, which is extremely exciting. Scott Adkins is also going to be in that. Louis Mandylor is in it as well. This is a feast for action fans. That's on the way. We got a lot to look forward to, as we always do when you want to see good movies in this genre, because they're coming out all the time. So yeah, Monkey Man, it is on the way, and it is in part a Monkey Paw production. So go Monkey Paw. And that is the one quick thing for the day, and that is our show. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at FeelingScenePod, or send us an email at feelingscene@MaximumFun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm Jorcrew on Twitter. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. The show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows,
supported directly by you.